Unfortunately, I have that dreaded warning light on the dashboard showing me that my Range Rover Evoque's battery is low and I need to start the engine. Now, I have tried to overcome this by charging the battery several times and resetting the BMS, which is the battery management system. Now, unfortunately, this didn't work, so I'm going to have to take the plunge and replace the battery with a brand new one. Now, replacing the battery is a pretty straightforward job, but there's one thing that you do have to bear in mind. You will need to reset the BMS. And the reason for this is because the BMS basically monitors the battery health and how much it charges. So you might land up undercharging or overcharging it, and it's just going to cause many issues down the line. One of the most common issues to arise straight away is that the stop start doesn't work, which, I mean, yeah, most of us don't actually like that feature, but if you're replacing your battery, you want everything to work as it should. So if we go ahead and pop the bonnet, straight away you will notice that my battery cover is missing. Now, this is simply due to the fact that I have recently tried to charge the battery and I didn't bother putting the cover back on because I knew I was coming to a stage where I'm going to be replacing this battery. You'll also notice straight away that there are two random wires running from the battery to this device over here. Now, this is a rodent scarer, but getting back to the task in hand, we are going to need to remove the vent that runs to the air filter, the strut bar and the trim around the battery. The air filter vent is simply held on with two trim screws. These just twist out the same as the battery ones. And then the strut brace bar is held on with two size 13 bolts on either side, as well as two small trim screws. You'll need a Phillips screwdriver to remove these. At this stage, I'll be removing the negative terminal on the battery using a size 10 spanner. Once the main bit is removed, it's also ideal to remove this other cable that joins to it. This requires a size 13 spanner. This is simply because it is really hard to tuck this cable out of the way with both sections still joined together. So once you've disconnected the battery, you can now remove this trim that surrounds the positive terminal side of the battery. Now, this should be pretty easy to remove with a flat screwdriver, but I'm using a trim removal tool. At this stage, it's pretty straightforward to remove the positive terminal and get that tucked out of the way. With the trim out of the way, we can now remove the battery clamp, which requires a size 10 spanner again. This is very fiddly to get out and it will just take a bit of patience. With everything out of the way, we can now go ahead and remove the old battery. Now, when you go to fit in a new battery, it is probably a bit easier to leave this trim on, just so that you can get the clamp in place without the wires touching the terminals on the battery. Bear in mind that you do need to connect the positive terminal first and then the negative afterwards. As well as this, you do also need to connect the breather pipe that goes on the side of the battery. So the rest of the process is pretty much a reverse of what we did to take the battery out. I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward through all of this so that you guys can see what we need to do once we get into the vehicle. With the battery all connected, I'm just going to go ahead and start the vehicle just to make sure we've got no warning lights. So the battery being disconnected has resulted in everything being reset back to factory default settings, and this is the reason why it's showing on the dashboard that is the 1st of the 1st 2015. It isn't because we've been doing any time traveling. So the only warning that we're seeing so far is that the bonnet is open, which we already know. So now that we know everything is working, I can go ahead and plug in my OBD2 scanner. This will allow me to reset the BMS, which will let the vehicle know that it's got a new battery. Now, you may notice a few changes, especially if you are driving an automatic vehicle. This is just because the vehicle is going to relearn how you drive. So the gear changes and stuff like that may be a little bit different to what you're used to, but it's just going to relearn your driving style and adjust accordingly. So yeah, this is a pretty straightforward task. It's the same as a normal vehicle to change the battery, but you do need to bear in mind that you do ideally need to reset the BMS because you don't want to harm this new battery, and also you don't want to cause any faults on your vehicle. I have popped a link in the description down below of where I sourced this battery. That was the cheapest supply at the time, and they did deliver next day, even though the delivery was estimated to be 2 to 3 working days. So thank you for watching my video, and if you found this video useful at all, please do hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Take care.